The preferred member group. I thought I was crazy for noticing this group of people in the various congregations I've attended, from the liberal to the NI. There's always a group I perceived as being somehow like a shadow leadership. They're really the ones in control of the church and the choices and the decisions and all that. They were typically mostly women, but of course men were there because they're married and they have kids and stuff, but mostly it was women. And I thought I was crazy. I'm just being too perceptive. I'm just being too, like, whatever, or thinking of them negatively. But no, when I started looking at other people's testimonies, or even people inside of other COCs referring to this group of people as kind of like the preferred members, I'm like, it is a thing. It is a thing. And see, I'm born into a preferred member family. I'm just the black sheep of it, which I guess, is good for me now. But I think maybe that's how I perceive it a little bit better than some other people. If you're from a preferred member group, you can kind of see it a little better. I don't know how that works, but it is real. It is a real group of people inside of these churches of Christ. They can form in other churches, particularly independent churches without oversight and structure. But it's really, really something to see in a Church of Christ congregation. So I want to talk about them today, how they get there, and how you may not have seen them or noticed them until you ran afoul of them in some way. And you don't quite know why, because they're sneaky. So who gets into this preferred member group? Generally, it's an inherited position, multi-generational COC families, especially elders' families and preachers' families. So they inherit the position. Their parents taught them to be in this role, and they inherit it. It's usually a few men in it that are eligible for leadership. They are on a fast track to ending up being elders or deacons. They are also fluent in the COC vocabulary, and they'll use the slogans more than most people. They're going to be more likely to say stuff like scriptural, sound doctrine or authority or pattern or command. They're more likely to say those words, even if you don't perceive what they truly mean by those words. They're going to say them all the time. They are people who never question publicly any of the doctrine at all. Nothing on the baptism, nothing on the worship, nothing on church identity. They never have the appearance of having a question or concern like that. And they are the ones that are willing to enforce group boundaries, and especially instincts towards other denominations. They're more likely to say, oh, you really shouldn't read that commentary. They're more likely to do stuff like that. But the ultimate thing that they all have in common is that they have internalized the Cine Bible reading method. That's like the sorting tool of who gets included in the preferred member group. They are the ones that have internalized that reading method. Some of the hangers-on outside the group might not have that method internalized, but they are the type that are so compliant and conformist that they won't question how conclusions are getting reached. Now, see, when you're in it, they don't tell you that they're using Cine. They just tell you they're plain reading. So you don't know this is a thing. Except my plain reading never matched theirs. And I thought that was just because they can't read the King James, or they can't, they got learning disabilities or something. I didn't realize that they were using a method designed to find commands to fit conclusions that they've already predetermined. And you don't need to be taught this method. If you, as a kid, you're wanting to please your parents, you're compliant, you're wanting to fit in, you've got these kinds of things happening, you're going to watch them and observe them, how they get to the conclusions. And part of Cine is telling you what you can't conclude. That's how the sermons are structured, to tell you more about what you can't conclude and who else is wrong. So you learn what the real conclusions are, and sort of internalize this method of reading the Bible to the point where you think you're plain reading. So Cine doesn't have to be taught. And those in those long-term COC families do instruct their children to read that way, not actually saying sinny. You know, they might not say the phrase, but they are mirroring that behavior to them and showing them how to do it so that they're more likely to be able to do it. If you didn't internalize sinny, it's very unlikely that you are a preferred member. Like me, I became a black sheep of that group because I never internalized sinny, because that sounds stupid. Why would I look at a book and say, let me find all the commands in this book? You know, I just would not think to look at the book that way. And I thought that they just had an issue with reading, you know. That's what I thought, because they read this book so differently than you would just a regular book. So I didn't internalize it, but I did play the game trying to figure out how they're getting that conclusion. So if something about you says that's illogical, or you don't think of the Bible that way, or maybe you're introverted and you just would rather be doing anything else than talking with them about their scripture conclusions, and you'd rather go in your car and read books, you might be safe. You might not inherit that sinny reading ability, but it sure is confusing to see them come to some of these conclusions, and you're sitting there reading, and it's crazy. You're like, how are you doing that? But that's the sorting tool of who gets put in, especially in the core group of preferred members. There's usually one or two head members, and then their tight circle of friends, 5 or 6 people, and then the hangers-on the outside. A lot of those will be different ages, but the core of the group is going to be usually in the older generation, usually 50 plus. Not that 50 is super old, I'm just saying that's when they kind of start really inheriting this position if their parents are not there anymore. And they all have sinny internalized, and that's labeled as faithful. Remember that? Start thinking back. They're labeled as the faithful. Their interpretations are faithful to the pattern, and they reject, you know, creeds, and they have congregational autonomy. But that's just masking the hierarchy that's in there, you know. Because the power inside of the church is unofficial, it allows it to be almost never accountable. So you have elders deciding what is sound doctrine, and preachers modeling the acceptable things you can talk about, and then this preferred member group shaping the consensus of it all. It's not formal, and that's not formal on purpose, because if it's not a formally announced leadership structure, then they can't hold it accountable. Do you really think everybody just shows up on Sunday, listens to the sermon, and goes home, and nobody's running things? Nobody's doing things. You really think the elders, the businessmen, are running all the social things and all these other event things in the church life and these outside? Do you think they're doing that? They're not. It's an entire group of preferred members doing that. And being in the preferred group has many privileges. They are seen as the modeling. They're the models for righteousness, and how you should look, and how you should dress, and how you should act, and the things that are okay to talk about and things that are not okay to talk about. They're the model of what's good and right with the one true church. So everybody else is supposed to copy them or mimic them. Because of that, they have greater presumption of orthodoxy. How they feel about scripture, what they think, that is considered the most orthodox, the common, the perfect and right interpretation. They get faster acceptance into like teaching places and leadership roles. All of them seem to be a shoe-in for getting into these roles. They don't have to go through the same processes as everybody else. It seems like it's just easier. And sometimes you just show up to church and suddenly this person and that person is now teaching, and it's because that is a privilege of the preferred member group. They also get a lot of leniency and grace when inconsistencies in their behaviors and interpretations pop up. That they're never corrected or rebuked. They never feel that at all. They can straight up imply that Jesus was rotten after resurrection, and no one will say anything to them. They get a lot of grace. Whereas if you say something that's a little like that, zombie Jesus, if you say something like that, that's a big deal. They'll say or do something. They'll you don't get any grace. If you have hardships in your life, you don't get any grace, but they do. And then their interpretations are always framed as plain reading and pure. Like they just really got it together. They really know they really know their scripture. They really know their scripture. And that one has always puzzled me, because people would say that about my mother and grandmother, how they were so smart and understood their scripture so well. But I'm telling you, as a child, a 5-year-old kindergartner, I have backed them into corners logically before with this scripture reading, and they are not smart. They're doing something funky with these scriptures to make them agree with them every single time. That doesn't make any sense. But they are seen as being really smart. And that's another thing about them, is that they have this air of pseudo-intellectualism about them. I perceive it as pseudo-intellectualism, but they will talk and talk and talk and say a bunch of nothing, right? It's like this trying to be smart. But that's one of the things that they're always framed as, is having this plain reading, but it's brilliant at the same time. But when you look at what the things they say and do, you're like, this isn't brilliant. This is stupid. You know what I mean? Or this is just, okay, whatever. This isn't brilliant, though. What are you talking about? You ain't no reformer. What are you... This is... They'll say some stuff that's just like off the chain, and that's framed as intellectual thought. But if you're not in that group, and you say something that's actually true or curious or something to ponder on, they'll look at you with side eye. Craziest thing. Their children are also treated as the safe Christians, the safe children within the congregation, if they have children or grandchildren. But those are the kids that the church life and activities can kind of function around those kids. Like their birthday parties are going to be, they're had at either the church or somebody's house, and that's like an event, a fellowship event. If your kid's not getting invited to these things, you feel the urge to get your kids to suck up to their kids. You have a lot of pressure to get the right gift. Their kids' school schedules kind of influence the timing of church events as well. They might even change the time of the Wednesday service or something like that, because, little Johnny now has soccer practice. It'll be stuff like that. And their children are perceived as the better kids. And so other people's kids are supposed to model those kids' behavior. And that can include clothing or the things that they're into. They all like this thing or that thing. And your kids are supposed to model the good kids' behaviors, wants, needs, stuff like that. So let's talk more about being able to identify this group. Because I want you to be able to think back and go, that something was kind of off about that, right? Something, I'm here to validate you. It was off. And it's because you couldn't perceive the preferred member group. So like I said, the linguistic markers, they have that scriptural, we just do Bible things in Bible ways, It's not a salvation issue, or is that biblical, or that's what the pattern shows, or we don't go by on what was written, They're using the slogans more. They are, even if it's not required or necessary. And you think it's just like Christianese type stuff, how people will use Christianese phrases. You think they're doing that in the same way, but no, these are like markers for their specific group. And they are never going to define what these phrases mean. What do you mean, is it biblical? What does do Bible things in Bible ways mean? What's the definition of scriptural? That they will never, ever define these terms, because within their group, all of them assume the meanings. They know the meanings. They assume it. And if you don't know the meaning, you're not assuming it the correct meaning, right? They don't care about you understanding the meaning. You're not a preferred member. That's why you might have had the feeling that they weren't really teaching anything. If you came into their church, they weren't really teaching. It was more like they wanted you to know stuff already. Like you had this feeling. It's like they want me to kind of know this already, or that I should know what they're talking about, because they're used to being around people who already presume the assumptions that these things mean. You can also identify them by their relationship to the authority in the church, minister, and elders. So how close they are to the ministers and elders. I'm not talking about, they get a little preferential treatment because they're adorably old, I'm not talking about that. I mean, they have direct, regular, private access to the elders and to the minister. That they can go and talk to these people whenever they want to. That is because they are part of the decision-making processes around the church. They are in charge of those things. So you have like a two-way relationship. The ministers and the elders need this preferred member group to be on board, and then the preferred member group, needs the elders and minister to know what they want. So you'll see them going to each other's houses, going out for little events together. I started seeing this on Facebook. We didn't have Facebook back in the day, but now we have Facebook. And you'll see they're going to each other's houses. They're going out for dinner events and stuff. And you're like, I didn't know the church was having an event. Or they have an event that is at a place that normal people can't afford to go to. That one boggles me. We're going to this really fancy restaurant. And everybody's invited, but like nobody but them in their age bracket with their income, could go to that. So you'll see it like on Facebook. They're always together in some way. There's no separation between the preferred member group and the elders and the minister. It gives them the impression, or gives them this informal authority within the congregation, and they can actually speak for the elders and the minister. And you might not notice this right off the bat, because you think, well, they just know each other so well. They're best friends. They've known each other for so long. They know what that minister meant or is saying or whatever. But look back at it again. They were speaking for the minister, for the elders, with authority. And they speak for the congregation as well on things. There's a men's meeting coming up. This preferred member group is speaking for the congregation, even though the rest of the congregation isn't agreeing with them. I've seen this happen. Most people will say it's a patriarchal church, but this preferred member group, I've always seen it, is mostly ran by women. But there'll be like a men's meeting, and the men will be downstairs, and that's really just the elders telling the men what they've decided to do about something. And the elder's wife and the preferred member group are upstairs or wherever else they're at in the building, telling the women and everybody else what conclusions are going to be reached. Like, everything's going to change now, guys. We're going to do this. We're doing that. And like, they already know, because they discussed this a long time ago outside of the church, because they're all connected together. I remember that the congregation wanted to go back to regular communion after COVID, but the preferred member group didn't. They thought that the cups were cute. The little COVID cups are cute. They're like little chalices, and they were convenient, and they just thought they were superior. So of course the elder says, no, we're not doing that. The congregation wanted a new camera. The preferred group doesn't want a new camera because they don't want to spend the money on it. Like, it's stuff like that. And it's why you get the sense that stuff is really convenient when they want something. Like, they seem to get the things they do want, but the things they don't want, the congregation doesn't get. Yet they're speaking for the congregation all the time. You'll notice their concerns are acted on much quicker. If they have an issue with something, the elder's there to fix it. The minister's there to fix it. They're getting their stuff fixed. Whatever they're interested in or wanting to do, They can say one day, you know what, we should have fall festivals. That'll be great. And then suddenly there's fall festivals. Where you could have been saying for years, we should have more fellowship events, something seasonal. We can do something like a winter ball. We can do, you could have been saying stuff like that for years and been completely dismissed. But the preferred member who says that suddenly now, instantly, without any discussion or anything, there's a fall festival now. You'll also be able to spot them because the sermons are usually for them. And okay, that sounds crazy, right? That sounds crazy. But the sermons are usually for them. I used to say when I'd hear those sermons, I'd say, well, that really just wasn't for me. And what I meant by that is like that it seemed to be aimed at people who were on Facebook a lot, who were worried about end time stuff and politics stuff. And like that's really that preferred member group in this particular church. That's the stuff they're always talking about. And so the sermon was always pulled back to stuff like that. If they ever discussed kids or younger groups of people or the elderly, like past that, it was always like in this dated way that seemed to use language relevant to the preferred member group. Like the millennials, and it was always negative too. Like the millennials are doing this and doing that, and children are just so disobedient. And I'm like, hello, I'm sitting right here. I'm a millennial. What are you talking about? How old do you think millennials are? Because we're 40. We're 40. I don't know how old you think millennials are. Like, how old do they think they are? It's like they think they're like teenagers or something. I don't know. That drives me. I'm sitting right here. I pay taxes. I'm a homeowner. What are you talking about? I am not on the YouTube or the MTV. Drove me crazy. I don't say things like sus. Like, what are y'all talking about? Church really seems to be about them. Like, that's what it felt like when I was an adult. Like, it really seemed to be about their taste and their likes. And even the decoration in the building seemed to be distinctly their style. When I was a kid, I remember thinking, you know what, when I'm an adult, I'll be able to have a say, but I'm thinking like we can have candy at the church, I'm not talking about dog or anything. But I think that's what's wrong, that, my family is just too fuddy-duddy, but when I'm in charge, we're going to have a potluck, I'm sorry, because that's silly, right? But then as an adult, I see that I'm never in that preferred member group. I'll never get to have a say about something like that. Yeah, I'll never be able to plan an event. Not that I want to plan an event, but like if I wanted to, you can't, because they plan everything. And if you plan something, no one will attend it. You had a guy who kept trying to do game nights and like games and snack nights, that kind of thing. And nobody would go to it. I went to it because it's fun, but nobody would go to it. But their little lame events, everybody went to. Like everybody went there with bells and whistles on. But I realized, you'll never get yours, like something to your preference. Not that that's what his church is for. Okay, don't go in other churches saying it has to be what you want. Okay, it's not what I mean. I just mean like these social things. They're never going to be catering to you in any way, like your time. So if you have kids, they get out of school at such and such time, but the preferred member groups doesn't have kids or their grandkids, they get out of school at whatever time. Events are planned around their needs, not your needs, right? Now I'm gonna get off track for just a second, but I don't think there's a huge difference between the NI, the more conservatives, to all the way up to the really liberal ones. And I'll tell you why. I don't think there's a difference in doctrine, but it's their appearances that are different. And their appearances are different because the preferred member groups are different. It's what the preferred member groups want that it ends up being what the church interprets in the Bible and likes, right? So you have a more liberal congregation. Maybe they have more wealth. Maybe they're in a bigger town or college town. So you're going to get a nicer church building and potlucks and bingos and, fellowship events. You might even get a pitch pipe if you're lucky. If you're more rural or more country, then those congregations might be a little bit more conservative. So they will want, their preferred member groups are going to want, they're not going to pay for projector screens. They don't want to pay, they're not going to pay for padded seats, whatever. They're not going to waste money on that stuff. That's not what they're into. They don't want that. They want more purity, right? So it's all about what the preferred member group wants that makes the difference in these churches. It's not the doctrine. Because they all have the underlying, plan of salvation, one true church. They all have that in common. The only thing different is what the preferred member groups want. Another way you'll kind of know that they're part of the preferred member group is based on who comes up to you first. If you're in a new congregation, it's because who comes up to you first is evaluating you for what you know, what you don't know, how safe you are. They evaluate new converts to see what background error they might have, to quickly start correcting language, and they're going to report any concerns about you upwards instead of discussing that with you. So when I went into my last congregation, I'm like, my family just talks religion so weird. I'm here to relearn. That was immediately flagged. I had no idea that it was going to be like that, because I thought, well, it's just my family and just the congregations my family was associated with, right? I didn't think it would be all of them, because they hammer in so hard about how autonomous they are. But it's in all of them. It's in all of them. And that's how I kind of realized what the shunning was, and instantly knew what that was about. I instantly knew what all of it was about. Now, in any church, the elders are going to come up to you. They're going to talk to you about it, whatever. Where are you from? All that kind of stuff. There is a bit of test element there. But in the COC, it's different. It just hits different. Because, they're trying to figure out how conforming you'll be. What do you already know? What don't you know? Are you here to introduce non-COC doctrine? They're wanting to know those things. I think in a regular church, it's more like, hey, where you come from? Nice to see you. Where you live. They're just kind of asking questions about you as a person. Whereas the COC is asking questions about what you know, what you don't know, that kind of stuff. So it just hits differently. And that brings me to our next thing. They report you. They go straight, they aim their complaints, their issues, their thoughts upward, above your head. They do not confront you or talk to you if they have an issue. They go straight above you and go straight to the elder, the pastor, the minister. And they do this all the time. They report people all the time. And I know you're thinking, no, they're so nice. That's the point. They are really, really nice people. They are really good, godly people. They are nice people. They do not need to do this thing. They do not. But they still do. They are entwined with the leadership so much. So they are responsible for keeping the one true church safe. So they're reporting you constantly to the elders, to the minister. And here's the type of things they're reporting. Your clothing. If you are talking about having read a book that's not COC. So I just read a Joyce Meyer. Oh, I just read this Billy Graham. And you think you're just having a conversation about something you read. That's reported. If you use an outsider term. I read something about this thing called the something principle. What was it called? What was the establishment principle or the regulative principle? I just read something, something about that. Let's talk about that. Instantly, you're getting reported for that. I just read something about predestination, or I just read this thing about free grace. What is that? You're getting reported. Those are outsider terms, and they are a huge red flag. And if you, I've seen this happen to so many people, because they come online a couple of months after this, not realizing why they're facing so much hostility. It's because they keep using these outsider terms, and they got flagged early on for it. and they just don't know it. They were reported to the elders. Yes, you were reported to the elders because you said a term you saw on a TV show or read in a book. And that's another thing. Books, you're reading an outside source. You just know you're reported for that. If you are a convert, you're new or old, really, but like especially converts. If you're asking why questions, you're reported. You can't ask why questions. You can't be curious. If you ask a question amongst them, you'll soon learn that you have to ask it in a way like that you know that they have such great wisdom, and I just thought you would understand this a whole lot more than I do. Would you mind going over this with me, because I think you know. You can't just straight up say, hey, why do you think that? Why do you why do y'all believe, or what is it y'all believe? Or you can't do that. You have to frame it as if they have this great wisdom. Like you have to grovel like that. If you are new to the church and you're from another COC, so you're from a moderate or liberal or NI or something, and then this congregation you're in now is not a moderate, liberal, or NI, they don't recognize other COCs as being valid. They logically would say on paper they do. But anytime they hear of another congregation, it's almost like, well, that is not the one true church. They're doing a thing. They don't recognize themselves, right? So if you come from another COC, they might have you redo your baptism and all these things, but you're still considered like coming in as a convert, you're a non-believer, almost. You're at that. I know that's crazy, right? That's crazy, but they will see you in a different light. If they're more liberal and you're coming from NI, they're going to see anything you say as being legalistic. And it didn't have anything, it might not have anything to do with the church or the Bible or anything, just regular life stuff. They're going to see you as being persnickety. And if you're a liberal and you're going into the NI, they're going to see you as not being faithful enough, not serious enough. It's just like that. So you're going to get reported. Even if you've been born and raised into a COC, you're going to get reported because you're a slightly different version of the COC. We got to watch them in case they might change it here. If you are articulating doctrine a little too confidently, especially as a woman, that you're going to get reported. They are going to go tell on you. They are snitching. You cannot talk about doctrine or theology or religion in a Church of Christ. They have already come to all the conclusions. Okay, stay with me now. You might have went to have a conversation about what does this passage mean or something, and you got dismissed, or, it was weird. You know what I'm saying? But you're like, I'm in the church. Why didn't they want to talk about the Bible? They don't do that there. They don't do that. You just get told what the conclusions are, and that's it. You don't sit around talking about it. Only the preferred member group can do that. And even they aren't doing it like you're wanting to do. They are looking for what commands are correct, what conclusions to conclude. They're not studying the Bible. So if you are a theology nerd and you're talking about something you read and you want to talk about it with them because you're in a church and you think it's what you're supposed to do, they don't do that. They don't do that. They also don't want you to articulate clear COC doctrine. So stuff that the COC believes or does. They don't want you to be too clear about that. If you're not in that preferred member group, they're going to report you. If you're saying, well, historically, COC did this, or, my church did this or did that, and you're talking about stuff that is common COC frames and terms and meanings and all that, you're getting reported. Because we don't talk about doctrine like that, especially confidence like that. No, the preferred member group is going to report you. If you're questioning how they get to their conclusions as well, that gets reported. It's not so much the conclusion questioning, because they'll throw proof text at you all day long. They'll do that all day long. They don't care about that. It's if you're asking, how did you get to that conclusion? Like, what was your thought process? Or how did you guys make this decision? Did you have this information, that information to make that decision? Because it seems like you may or may not have. You know, if you're asking about the processes, the thought process, the system, if you're pointing out something like that, how did you get there? How did you arrive to this choice that you made? That's going to get reported. Because for them, they're the one true church, so all this stuff just flows because they're the one true church. They do everything correct and right. There is no preferred member group doing all this stuff. There's nobody's doing this. This is flowing perfectly good and nice. That's why a lot of people like going to attend a COC. It feels very friendly and warm, and you go in there and everything seems to be okay until it isn't, until you start seeing the cracks in it, until you start seeing this weirdness. It seems all flowing, and it's just so casual, and it's just, but it's an illusion. It's all an illusion. If you wear clothing that is perceived like too tight, too short, too fashionable, or just not in congruency with the style of the preferred member group, you're getting reported. If it hasn't dawned on you how I'm talking now, this is a woman-controlled thing. Even though there's men involved in this and they use men, it's a woman-controlled group. So they're focused on the social stuff, all right? And if you were a teenager and had an elder come up to you and tell you your shirt was too tight, has it dawned on you yet that they were sent to do that? Let it sit with you, because you're thinking it's the patriarchy. It is not. It is the preferred member group who sent that man, who probably didn't care, over to talk to you. They reported you. Same with hairstyles, makeup, weight changes, jewelry, especially clothing worn while, if you had anything to do for the men, if you had anything to do with leading the singing or teaching children or serving or preaching, they'll critique clothing. Yes, maybe give it a second. If you've been critiqued on clothing and just your appearance, that is the preferred member group, and they sent an elder to talk to you or the minister to talk to you. You were reported. Where do you think those "we missed you" phone calls come from? You were reported. You were talked about in the preferred member group. And they sent people to send text to you saying, "We missed you." So if you miss a Sunday morning without any explanation, that's going to get reported. That's talked about. If you attend sporadically, if you sit in a different area than normal, anybody have that happen to you? Everybody have that happen? Where were you sitting? Why'd you sit over there now? Like, so you have to explain when you want to move around the congregation in a different seat. Have you had? I've had that happen to me. I have. That is wild to me. Why would you care where I'm sitting? Why would you care? Craziness. But that will get reported. That will get talked about. If you leave immediately after the services without good explanation, I had to run home and do this. But if you're just always leaving immediately after services, they're reporting you. If you're not attending as much as possible, you're going to get reported. If you're attending but not really visible, you're not really interacting too much, that's reported. If you express uncertainty instead of confidence with what is preached, if you are not praising the sermon or praising whatever nonsense was just said in front of your good eyes and your good ears and you just heard the stupidity, if you're not praising that, reported. Speaking with authority or confidently, right? You can't do that. Only they can. You're getting reported. Sharing your personal spiritual struggles with others in the COC gets reported. Yes, you heard me. Your spiritual struggles that you might share within, say, like a women's Bible study, we're not allowed to have struggles in the COC. So when women are talking about that stuff, they can talk about it. It'll be the silliest stuff that they'll talk about, so serious, right? And you're thinking, well, that's not really enough to be upset about. Really, they need to talk about something else, but they can't. So they just tone it all the way down so it's not so bad. Because they know, it's going to get reported. The elders are going to know your specific spiritual situation when they shouldn't, because you're just talking with friends who you think are friends. Or you think you're being open. You think, you're asking for advice. Oh, no, they're reporting you. They're reporting you. That's why you don't get any real advice. Because they're just listening to go back and tell the elders and the leaders. That's why they don't have any sympathy or empathy for your problems. They're not listening to you for that. They're going for information. After I left the COC, I went to lunch with one of the ladies, and I was having some marriage issues. It's a difficult time, right? And, we go for lunch, and it's lovely and nice. I love talking to her, and I had a good time. But, she was doing that to go back and tell the leadership what was going on in my marriage, why I wasn't attending. And she's going back to report it. Because she never talked to me again after that. Someone who kept trying to talk to me, and I talked back and forth to all the time, now, after this lunch, she doesn't talk to me anymore. Because she got all the information she needed to go back and report. I mean, she didn't get it all. I'm not stupid. But still, I was annoyed. You can also never question Cindy, because they, on the surface, will deny they're using it. You cannot frame doctrine like pastorally, like in a caring way or a guiding way. It's only for getting to conclusions. So that's why there's not a lot of that going on there. You're going to get reported. If you're mentioning church history, Alexander Campbell, other traditions as well, if you're talking about other traditions positively, you're going to get reported. If you're just, you're a history nerd, you love talking about history and how things form and all that, you're reported. If you emphasize grace too much, reported. If you ask about conscience or liberty or disagreement or how do we do these things, you're getting reported. Your social life is up for grabs too. If you're spending time with non-COC Christians, and if you're talking to how they would perceive liberal, which just means they have a kitchen or something, If you're talking to other variations of COCs, you're getting reported. Visiting other churches, you're getting reported. You can't go on vacation and visit another type of church. You can't do that. That gets reported. You can't quote and read outside authors. You cannot host gatherings without leadership oversight. And I know that's never stated from the pulpit, right? Right? But if you do that, if you host an event at your house and don't seek a preferred member group oversight of it, you're going to face a problem. They will shut that down. They will get people to not go to that. And you think it's just meeting up with a few friends or whatnot. No, it's not. No, it's not what you're doing. You're not allowed to have these kind of things going on at your house, in your social life. You can't have activities or gatherings at your house without the elders knowing about it. You also can't change friends, your friend group within the congregation. If you notice that happens, that's your friend group, you're not really vibing with this group, okay? It's the first group you met when you get there. And you start vibing with another group, right? And you think you're just at a church, you're just talking to everybody, it's fine. Nope, gets reported. The preferred member group is going to keep an eye out for that. Because you can only be sucking up to one group of people. They'll also report your social media. If you're not interacting with them enough, if you're not posting the right things. I know one woman who, one of these preferred members was just a bit too much on social media. And this woman wanted to take a break from social media anyway. So she kind of blocks the woman, not blocks it, but unfriends, and then stops doing social media. She says it's too much for her, right? That that preferred member went straight to the elders and reported her for that. And she was really confused when this elder comes and confronts her about this nonsense on Facebook. And he was telling her she needed to be more friendly, more welcoming, more forgiving, and more, just doing more. When this woman has a right to not have this woman as her friend on Facebook. Yes, there's some Karen level, next level stuff, right? Imagine a Karen has authority to go to a police officer and have that police officer enforce everything she wants. It's the same thing. So yeah, you're going to get reported for Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, whatever you're doing. You're going to get reported if they don't like it. If you're not with them, you know what I'm saying? You're going to get reported. Your children's behavior is reported, your dress, their friendships, your parenting style, if it's too lenient, you'll start getting comments. Your teenagers who are questioning things, that's reported. Your spouse's influence on you or your influence on them, that's reported. The husband not leading strongly enough, the woman not being submissive enough, which they distort the meaning of those terms anyway. It's not even humanly possible to be like that, but they'll report that stuff. Women who are speaking too confidently in mixed settings, women influenced in discussions or decisions, men perceived as passive and quiet, couples not fitting expected dynamics, not being neurotypical or not masking well enough, whatever. If you're not enthusiastic enough, if you're less visible when you agree with things, if your facial expressions during sermons are not right, if you're emotionally distant from them and hard to read, yeah, that gets reported. And when you get reported, you're not always confronted about whatever it is. But when you are, they always come to do these same things. It's been brought to our attention. Someone was concerned. Some concerns were raised. We noticed a pattern here. They'll phrase it as if, they're just concerned, They're just curious. But if you ask them who noticed this, they'll be very vague and evasive. They won't answer. There is no observation attached to how they're coming to this conclusion. It's just them saying, "Oh, we're just acting from a gentle concern. We're being genuine here. I saw this, or you said this to me, or I just perceived it, or whatever." No, they were sent there. They were sent there. The issue is often more social than like biblical or moral. Clothing, tone, attitude, frequency of attendance, question asking, associations and friendships and fellowship and these things. Those things are more likely to be reported. You'll also see them report stuff dealing with children's classes or the teenagers' classes. Not the sermon or anything, but we were concerned. Some concerns were raised about something you said in the children's class, and you're like, what? Who raised the concern, or who said this, or whatever it is seems so out of left field. And you know why? Because it's coming through like 3 or 4 people in the preferred member group to this elder who was sent to you. The elder never had this concern. They were sent there. They're puppets. That elder will have details also about whatever this is that you never share with them. They'll gaslight you into thinking that you did share this in some way, or that they just noticed or whatever, but no, you didn't share these details. They weren't there at this event, or not there. There's details that they don't know. They're not supposed to know. And sometimes if this is a lie, and sometimes it is a lie, the preferred member group will lie about you to get you out. But they'll have details in whatever it is that they should not know. Because you're not going to go talk to these businessmen elders. It'll be details from private conversations with another woman. Comments made in like social, casual settings out in the parking lot. Or observations from behind you. Like if they sit behind you in the pews. Yeah, or the elder will talk about patterns they notice. But those patterns require prolonged watching. And you would know if there was an elder breathing down your neck, right? You know what I'm saying? This is a preferred member, and usually a female one. One who has been conditioned to protect the one true church. One who's just running on a program. And these elders often will not believe you. Won't believe you. And see, in a healthy church, if this was to happen, if a person came up to bug about behaviors, clothing, stupidness, that elder or pastor would say, have you talked to them? They would say that, right? Or they dismiss you, or like, okay, you're just being a bit too persnickety. I love the word persnickety. You're just being a bit too much. You've got notions and you need to cut it out, right? They'll be dismissive in a way. But in the COC, that preferred member group is rewarded for every time they snitch or go talk, because that's seen as righteous behavior. That's viewed as righteousness. So a person from a group like the COC goes into a healthy church and gets dismissed, and their righteousness isn't affirmed, they immediately get defensive and will go on the attack because you're questioning their righteousness. They're doing all the right things. That's why they think they're supposed to do that. Like if they go in a healthy church, they think they're supposed to go monitoring everybody's behaviors. And they'll go snitch all the time. And because they come from a church like the Churches of Christ and that preferred member group, that's righteousness going. They get rewarded for that stuff. So, of course, they do it every 30 seconds if they can. And you know it's them because this elder has such secondhand information and it's so one-sided and stupid. It's usually something stupid. I'm sorry. It's usually something stupid. It's not like you got caught, in a compromising position, you know what I'm saying? It's not something serious like that. It's something like you unfriended some folks on the Facebook recently and you're like, what? It's stupidness like that. Or you had the kids coloring a page in the kids class and, we were concerned if that was appropriate. That's one of the preferred members coming after you. And that elder is not concerned. He doesn't have curiosity about you. They have the personality of potatoes. They don't have a curiosity about your inner life, or they don't want to find out about this issue either. They just tell you to do better. And you are left confused and bewildered. It's because he's not an actual elder. He's just delivering the message to you to stop doing whatever it is that you are doing that's offending or upsetting the preferred member group. He's not discovering. He's not trying to use discernment. He's not trying to get to the bottom of it. The outcome is already decided. And listen, this stuff happens. It's just like with the shunning. Over stuff you would not perceive as being an issue. But if you get some time away from the situation, you can look back and say, that happened right after, I got my hair done differently and started changing the way I dress, new phase in life, Or you got a new friend group. Or you missed a couple of services there for some reason. This stuff started happening after an event like that. And once you're on the outs with a preferred member group, you don't get back in good standing, ever. You never come back into closeness with them. You can keep trying to people please and get it back together. You can't. They don't declare you safe. So you had your shot. You had your shot to get into the preferred member circle, like on the outskirt edges. Maybe after 30 years, you would be somewhere closer to the center. But you had your shot to stay on the outside. And you didn't take it, or you did something that messed that up. So you're never coming back close to it at all. That's why you see a lot of COC people, like in comments on video or Facebook or something, or YouTube, they'll make a reference to how long they've been in the COC. Been in it 30 years all my life. We don't teach that. Been in it 50 years. We don't teach that, because the length of time you've been in matters to them. I mentioned that because it would take that amount of time for you to get into the preferred member group if you have gotten just maybe on that outside edge. But it would take you that amount of time to start getting closer to the center, and you're really not ever going to get there. And who else isn't going to be included in the preferred member group? Number one up is converts, especially adult converts, especially like over 20-ish converts. Never going to get into the preferred member group. Converts are always probation. That they're on lifetime probation. Their background and things they might introduce must be managed, their language corrected, and their instincts are just reshaped into something else, right? So even long-term converts are rarely trusted enough at the same level of those raised in it. They can get close, but you have to be going on that 30, 40 years. And you have to be so loyal and nice. You have to be projecting so much goodness and sweetness that you give people diabetes. And that's very difficult to do. So converts, not going to make it in there. It happens, but not often. Not often at all. People who ask why too much about the methods and Cine and how choices are made permanently disqualified you. You cannot question the system that we don't have. You cannot question the invisible creed that we claim we don't have. You cannot question this hierarchy that we claim is not here. You seeing it means it exists. So you are not going to be a preferred member if you can see the strings being pulled. So no, you're automatically out. If you love history, you're historically literate. You like church history. You like the writers, the Reformation debates, and the development of doctrine. If you're able to connect dots easily like that, you like look. Oh, this seems to have come from that kind of thing. And if you're like that, you're never getting in the preferred member group. You're never making deacon, elder, any of that stuff. You're just not unless you've married a lifer. You're not going to get into any of those spots. History is, that's disagreement. That's non-COC orthodoxy. Preferred member status requires present conclusions to appear timeless. That they have to be obvious. We've always existed. We are the only ones. So just introducing church history, no, you can't do that. People who are more pastoral thinkers, they see how doctrine is, affects the consciousness and, shepherds the weak and, applies unevenly and requires wisdom. These thinkers, these kind people, these stuff like that, those kinds of things, not getting in the preferred member group. No, that's not what doctrine is for. Doctrine is for proving our preconceived notions and conclusions that we're the one true church. You're not getting in if you're talking about, wisdom and learning and helping and caring and Christian life. You're not getting in. Women who teach too clearly, you are not getting that preferred member group. And if you don't believe me, go look at COC Women's Bible Studies materials. They are so dumbed down. It's infuriating. It's infuriating. You can listen to them talk and they're just not even saying anything. There's nothing there. You think this is a Bible study? There's nothing happening. They don't talk clearly about their doctrine and belief in the Bible. There's no clear speaking. It's just these conclusions kind of wrapped up in this bunch of talking that is nothing. So they're not going to have women who are able to talk about what something in the Bible means or what is happening. They're not going to, no, you're not getting in there. Men without enforcement instincts, that, who quiet, reflective, gentle, conflict avoidant, they're not preferred. It's a little strange because I've seen men like that get into those elder spots and in a preferred group because of their wife that they married who was a lifer. It just depends kind of on the congregation how they view these things, but generally men who are just kind of more easygoing, not gonna don't want to get into it. They're not willing to get into some debate or argument over the baptism being done properly. Just don't care, right? It's not their wheelhouse. So those kinds of men are not getting into the preferred member group. People with broad reading habits, non-COC theologians, you're not getting in there. Devotional literature outside of their traditions, you're not getting in the preferred member group if you're talking about having read that stuff. Philosophy, psychology, sociology, you're not getting in there. You don't talk about and read those things. You're not allowed to. See, I'm going on this list and you're sitting there thinking, man, maybe this is why that thing happened. Yes, it is. Because this is outright silliness. If you're independent and not transparent, so you keep your private life private, you decline to overshare, you set boundaries, you do not seek approval, you can never be a preferred member. The informal elites of the preferred member group require visibility to function. If you are a private person, people can't read you very well. You set these boundaries so that you have your life is separate from whatever nonsense is going on over there. You're never getting into that preferred member group. And you definitely can't if you set boundaries, because you have to be someone who doesn't set boundaries to get in there. If you're someone who handles conflict more directly, in a kind way, not like you're going around confronting people. I'm talking about, somebody's done something or said something and you go straight to that person and say, hey, this kind of hurt my feelings, and you work on it and don't keep holding a grudge. Like, you're mature that way instead of escalating that stuff upwards or continuing to be like having this nastiness about you. If you handle those things maturely, you're not going to be in the preferred member group. You're just not going to be. You have to be someone who is sneaky, who is just off to the side doing your mess. You can't be someone who's mature in that way. Those who can leave are never going to be preferred members. And what I mean by that is they're financially independent. They're socially networked outside of the congregation. They have friend groups that are outside of that group. You're confident that you could worship anywhere. Independent people, those are inherently unmanageable, and that preferred status depends on them never deviating from the path for any reason. And if you have outside help or ability to go to another church or something like that, you're not going to get in the preferred member group. You have to, in your mind, believe you are truly, this is the only church. This is the only one. You have to truly believe that in your mind. And having access to other churches or whatever, not allowed. So what are their preferred member personality traits? Okay, here we go. They are informal elites, boundary enforcers, and stabilizers to this system. Let's name them so we can systematize them, all right? So here's their personality. Risk adverse. They're order oriented. They're certainty seeking. They're highly attuned to social approval. Their identity is strongly tied to group acceptance. They're black and white thinkers. They have a low tolerance for vagueness. They have a strong preference for settled conclusion over inquiry or curiosity. They confuse consensus, like the majority, with truth. So as long as enough people say this is true, then it's true. They equate disagreement with instability. So they will immediately squash disagreement, usually kind of harshly, just to avoid that feeling of instability. When disagreement is normal and part of everyday life, you should be able to handle conflict, but they can't. They are indirect communicators. They are conflict avoidant and influence seeking, which is an odd thing. They're not willing to have a spine about them, like in that way, that they'll avoid the conflict, but they also want the influence. And usually someone who's influential is, going to have a bit of a presence about them, right? They're going to be able to deal with conflict, even if they're causing it. They know how to either create it or deal with it or whatever. But for them, they are avoidant of those things, but also influence seeking. which is like contradictory. So that's one of the reasons I don't think they do well in regular churches. If they were to go to a regular healthy church, they're never going to get to a preferred member group status or near the leadership being like this. They are comfortable with triangulation. They will triangulate the snot out of you until you think it's all just happens. But it's not. There's some triangulation all around you going. They have a strong preference for authority-mediated interactions. They're going to get the authority to come interact here. When it makes no sense. Come on, like Facebook stuff, like that. But they want the authority because I'm Karen, and this authority is going to do what I need it to do. They are loyal upwards and corrective downwards. So anybody above them, they perceive above them, they are incredibly loyal to, incredibly goo gaga-eyed over. But anybody below them that they perceive below them is garbage. It needs to be corrected and brought to in agreement with them. They have a strong concern with appearance and righteousness. Righteousness likes to be visible. So they are concerned about appearing, having appearance and appearing as godly and righteous, or at least, reframing it that way. They'll reframe what righteousness is. So correction is actually love, right? So they make their nasty personality quirks look like righteousness, right? And they love projecting that stuff. They measure faithfulness by compliance and visibility. They have low emphasis on conscious or internal struggle. Have you noticed that? You can be going through something and it's just, there's almost nothing there in them that is sharing in that with you. It's like a lack of empathy. It's creepy sometimes. They have a lack of that stuff. They don't even feel bad for you. It's like, I don't know. It's weird. Emotionally, they're always going to be anxious beneath that confidence. They're very sensitive to disorder and deviation. They experience control as safety. They feel threatened by independent thinkers, people they can't get to be conformed. They report concerns rather than addressing them. We've talked about that. All those things, all those times. I know somebody's listening to this going, oh my gosh, that was why that happened. Because you got reported. Yes, that's why that happened. You got reported. They monitor the attendance and speech and tone and posture and where you're sitting at. They reinforce the norms socially before elders can intervene or stop them. They reinforce these norms. They're in control of that stuff. They rarely admit being uncertain themselves. They rarely apologize. Never, actually. They never apologize. Those on the outer circle of the preferred member group, they're going to be conscientious and cooperative and earnest and approval seeking, and desire to do right without rocking the boat at all. They accept conclusions without fully interrogating any of the methods or questioning that. They ask practical questions, never structural questions. They're not asking how they get there. What is it? They're asking very practical questions. They defer to authority instinctively. They avoid theological exploration. They are polite, very careful, very differential. They avoid conflict entirely. They look to preferred members for cues, which is that shunning. You'll start when the shunning happens. I don't think they actually talk about that. I think it's a natural thing. You said and done something, and they know to start doing that, and they look for cues on it. They do, and I think it's just awful stuff. They adjust their behavior very quickly when corrected. If someone comes to correct your behavior, correct something you've done, okay, I want you to have in your mind 4 or 5 people that you would trust to give you a logical correction that isn't biased, that is coming from a good place. And you take your correction, if it's needed, from those few people, not from everybody in a church. Okay? Because I think when people leave the COC, they go into other churches and they carry with them these behaviors they might have had that they gain from having closeness to the preferred member group, and so they'll go in another church, and there's nefarious people that'll try to correct your behavior, correct your behaviors, and if you immediately do it, you're giving them a signal that you're compliant and they can mess with you, right? So, in your head, you need to have just a small handful of people who would have the ability to walk up to you and tell you something you're not doing necessarily right, or you should change your opinion on, or you might be going a bad direction. And then if anybody else comes up to you within that church, you either dismiss it or go find that person that you trust to actually give you information on. Because I think we wear something on us that signals that we come from a place like this. And then other people who come from places similar to the COC, they may be in healthy churches and they can spot that. And they know how to run the testing on it. Now, I don't know what terminology psychology would use for this, but I think it's a thing. So when you go into a new church, if you leave the COC and you decide to start attending church, you need to narrow down. There is one or two people who I would trust to give me truth and not sugarcoat, and to not have a bias, okay? And then you don't make best friends with them. You don't make best friends with them. You don't, they're not part of your life. You just go, that is a person, okay, that is a person I can trust to give me that kind of stuff. Because that way, if somebody else in the congregation starts coming up to you doing that kind of stuff, you'll know to dismiss it or to go to that person. So I don't know what else to say about that, but it is a thing. It is a thing that, you'll correct your behavior really quickly. And it's because you were close enough to that outer ring of the preferred members that you were conditioned to do that, to automatically alter your identity, your preferences, lower your boundaries for the sake of what they have determined is righteous and good. So go into a new church. Don't do that no more. Let's not do that anymore. If you're in the COC, these outside of the ring members of the preferred member group, they're almost like they're the kind that you tell them to jump, like, how high, or, well, mother, may I do this? They're like that. It is so icky to me. But they are like that. Gosh, it's so strange thinking about them, because they're all so nice. And they don't need to behave and do these things. And these are all negative personality traits I'm listing. These are negative things. This is a church that reinforces and rewards dysfunctional personalities and coping mechanisms. It's a church that's going to reward that. And these people would not fare well in a healthy, structured church. They just wouldn't. A healthy, structured church is going to tell them, okay, listen, you're not going to come to the elders every 5 minutes talking about somebody's pantyhose having a tear in it, or somebody ain't being nice to you on Facebook, or because that person read a book you don't like. They would dismiss them immediately. And that person is going, well, I'm being righteous and protecting the one true church. And then in a healthy church, they're like, no, you're not. Get out, It's not going to work for them. They're not going to, in a structured church, you got a structured church, you got some strong elders, you got strong leaders there, you got some oversight of the congregation, maybe have something above that. You have these things. There's no reason for a preferred member group to form. Now, they can still leave a church like the COC and go cause some damage in a church, increasing anxiety, making people more perfectionist, and people more anxious that they're doing that stuff. But eventually they'll leave, because eventually their righteousness is not going to be acknowledged or rewarded once people kind of catch on. So they don't do well. And I think, that's where our church hoppers come from. No, I don't know. No, just a theory. It's just a theory. But if you see them hopping in big, vast, different denominations, I think that might be a thing. I don't know. Something to ponder on. I just find that so interesting that these personalities who are running this church in a healthy, structured church would not fare well. They would not make it. They wouldn't like it there. It would be uncomfortable for them. They wouldn't have any control. They wouldn't have any of that stuff. They wouldn't have this certainty. They wouldn't get rewarded for dysfunctional behaviors. They wouldn't be put in positions of power and authority, even if informally. They wouldn't be put in those positions if they don't know who Moses is or what, you know what I'm saying? In a church, they wouldn't, that's contradictory, I don't think these people would fare well in a regular church. I mean, they will report you for reading outside books or studying church history. That's insanity, right? That's like the opposite of what, you go to church to talk about. If you're going to talk to people or have fellowship, you're going to talk about those things. So it's like it's a church made for people who would not do well in a regular church. And I don't know what to say about that. Like a regular, healthy church. Any denomination that's like got your elders and you're digging and you got some oversight and you got structure. And you dismiss dysfunctional behaviors, right? And they would not fare well in one of those churches. And I found that fascinating. I know that the behaviors of my mother and grandmother, who are, the queens of the preferred member group in the church I grew up in, they would not have done well in any other church organization that I've ever seen. They would not have done well. Because they wouldn't have been able to instruct the elders on who is in and who is out, who's doing good behavior, who's doing bad behavior. They wouldn't have had this insight or fast track to getting what they want and things that they have concerns about. They wouldn't have this fast ability to deal with that. They would not have done well. They wouldn't have done as well in one of these churches where they don't need a preferred member group because they have structure, they have clear doctrine, they have clear sets of behavior that don't include, pretending we're the one true church and projecting righteousness. So they just would not have done well. I find that fascinating. But anyway, that is the preferred member group. I could probably go on forever. Hopefully this helps somebody. Hopefully this to understand what the heck happened, because it was such a great church. You loved it. Everything was nice and great until something happened, some life event, or until you made a change, or maybe you read a book, or you said it's all these stuff that just normally happens because you're a human and you're on the outs now. Or maybe you got married and your spouse is different from them or is not really accepted by them or for whatever reason. And now you realize you're not invited to couples events. You're not invited anymore, or you're being shunned for things, or your children are, their schedules are never preferred over this other group of children. Your kids have to cater to these other kids. Stuff like this. If you've had this happen to you, everything was great. Everybody's so loving and welcoming, and the preferred member group that you don't really know is there. They're the group that appears to be doing so much for the church. They seem so loving and active, and they are inspiring for you. You want to model them and be like them, and that's all by design. They're just controlling the good works in the church is what, really what it is. They do all the good works in the church. That's why they're doing so much. And it's also important to recognize that they were conditioned to be this way. Okay, they don't have evil intent. They don't know that what they're doing, like snaking off to the elders every 5 seconds, they don't know. They don't know that they're doing behaviors that are dysfunctional. They don't know that they're causing harm to people. They have been conditioned to protect this one true church, and that's what matters. If you're a threat to that, then you became a threat, even if because you just read a book, or you started dating somebody, or you switched jobs, or whatever it was that got you reported. And just a side note, they're not formally reporting you, by the way. They don't go to the minister's office to report you. I'm making that sound very clerical. No, they're not. They're already hanging out together all the time. So this is just conversation for them. They're just doing how their parents did. Sat around hanging out together, talking about these things. And you're getting reported that way. And that's how that happens. They don't know or realize that they're doing something the first century Christians would never do, because they were just conditioned that this is what the first century church does. This is what the one true church does. This is how they handle things. They don't see it as being Karens. They don't see it as forcing conformity. They don't understand that at all. They think that what they're doing is correct. It's like a spiritual blindness. So it's important not to waste a lot of energy hating it or hating them. They're just running on the program that they were set on. Now, they made the choice to go on that program at some point, but they're just running on this program. So it's important not to send too much hate to them. They're the reason the church is bad. They're not the reason the church is bad. They're not the cause of your issues, right, in the church. That system was there long before you were ever there, and it's been, running amok for many, 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 many decades, right? It wasn't set out to harm you specifically. If you waste energy hating them, then you misunderstand and miss the point of how and why and how they got there, how they came to be what they really are. They're a product of formation. They're a product of indoctrination. They're a product of conditioning. They're a product of parenting and environment. They're not villains by intent. They have adapted to a very, very controlled, high control group, and that's how they cope with it. They learned that this is safer. It's safer to be this way. Belonging and spiritual approval depended on them being this way, vigilant and in alignment and having the same thoughts as everybody else. That is a coping mechanism. It looks like malice to us here in 2025, but it's often just their fear internalized, their anxiety, their uncertainty, and their gospel has been ritualized. So it's important not to mistake their adaptions for their character, for who they are or who they could have been had they not been brought up in this church. And their identity is so intertwined with this. You'll never get them to leave. You won't. But their morals is so narrowed to the role that they occupy, whereas us out here don't have that. We don't have to deal with that. They do. They are stuck. Their entire identity is structured on such a thin line inside of that church. Their identity, their role in life, their purpose in life is it's like a pinprick of size that they weren't allowed to form anything bigger than that. And because of that, they lost the ability long time ago to imagine things, to think of Christianity in a different way, to have curiosity, to ask questions, to love the world, to love people. They lost that ability. If you hate them, you're only kind of mirroring them in a way, because they are already black and white thinkers. And so they make good, bad, put everything into categories: good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. If you decide to just hate them for what they did, you're doing the same thing. Just putting them in a category. This is why they see a lot of people who leave as being, bitter or uncharitable or dangerous spiritually, that, and they dismiss it. So if you go at them with hatred in your heart, they perceive that as validating the thing that they're in, that they're stuck in, and the prison they're in. And you don't want to do anything that contributes to keeping them there. So we don't want to validate that system. We don't want to do something that agrees with that system. I poke fun. I do. I poke fun. But we can't go to hate. Even though they participated in these behaviors that probably did some serious harm, you can't hate. And it also just doesn't feel good to hate them, because it ignores the cost that they have paid to remain safe. This has cost them a lot. They don't have the gospel. They haven't heard a sermon that's not a one-sided debate. This needing safety cost them that. They're maintaining a tabernacle for salvation. It cost them a relationship with Christ. That's a really high price. So what you should have hatred for is not the preferred members. They're not your enemy. It's the system that formed them. And systems are dismantled with truth, not hating them, not outright hatred, because that gets dismissed and reinforces those systems, right? And we want this to stop happening. So you had an elder come up to you, tell you your shirt was too tight. Valid to want to punch him, okay? But see what caused that to happen. Keep going with it, so we can talk about that instead of framing it as if we're mad at men or something. There's a larger system here at play. There's the conditioning, the behaviors, all that stuff is happening. We can't just go straight to hate. Hate is too easy, and we don't do easy anymore. No more black and white thinking.